Growing up in Kalk Bay, my first memories of Windsor Road was this beautiful families, neighbors we had. We were 5 neighbors in the lane, which we called the Gang. There was Mrs. Kwaai and her daughter Auntie Lissy, Joycey, Ike, and Uncle Peter. Pitty, we used to call him, fisherman. Next to her was Mrs. Della Cruz with her 2 sons, Carols and Angie and Lorna. Down was Mr. Hart. He was a single gentleman that lived there. That is how, when I opened my eyes, Mr. Hart was our neighbor, which we lived in number 3 Windsor Road, was Sophia, my mother, my sister, and my brother. And then we had her brothers, which was Uncle Freddie and Uncle Peter. That was us in that house. In the front was Mrs. Hildebrand and her son Simon and her daughter Matilda and Mavis and her sister Auntie Tilly and Mickey. This was our neighbors in the Gang. The boarding house in front was the Kafars. Mrs. Kafar, I never ever saw Mrs. Kafar's husband. He must have died when I was born or something. But she had Sit and Mila, most beautiful girls, and Fati, Dochi, and Mahadin, which was my friend. They lived in the double-story house in the front of our house, and on the other side was of them were the shoemaker, Jackie Kalant and his brother Soto and his granny Ajima. Ajima was a very old lady, but she was a professional in healing children's eyes. She could never speak English, but she came. Auntie Mary, my sister, brought Estelle, her eldest daughter, because the doctors couldn't make out what was wrong with Estelle's eyes. And my mother said, bring her to Ajima. And Ajima, the Lord knows what she did, but Estelle's eyes is fixed till today, and she's 72 years old now, 72 or 73. Ajira never told us her secrets, what she used. That was Jackie's grandmother. Yes. She reared Jackie and his brother and his sister, Jiminy. And then on the front side was the other shoemaker, Gallo Shanker, which he had a family. His wife's name was Nandi, and the daughter was Santi and Sigan and Tulsi and Kanti and Tarmati and Amarat. And up the road we had the Ferreiras, Uncle Stavi Ferreira. He used to fill the diesel on the harbour with his wife Auntie Jean. Yes. She was at home with her 5 daughters and 1 son, Gustav. He was the only one in that road, our culture, that owned the house. Everybody else rented. He owned that property. And then on the going up, he was opposite Mr. Wilson, the garage. He was the panel beater, the best panel beater you could find in Windsor Road. And Mr. Klein was next to the Ferreiras. And further up the road, we had the Stockbridge and the Skitters, which had the little shop on the station that sold papers, the newspapers, and you had that little shop that's still there on the station there now.
Okay.
Him and his wife and his 2 daughters ran that little shop. That was the Skitters, and up the lane was the Stockbridge. Then we had Harp. Harp, who was a rugby player. He used to run with Peter, Oma's brother, Uncle Peter. Also, that was to play rugby, practicing on the beach. He was one of the Springbok. He became a Springbok player, Harp. We all lived as neighbors. And going back to Uncle Jackie them's side, there was Mr. Pratton's shop. And on top of that shop, they had flats where Mrs. Rowley and her husband. Mrs. Rowley was a true Afrikaner, and Mr. Mr. Rowley was a Londoner that couldn't understand a word of English, of Afrikaans. And she used to get so frustrated with him when he used to call. He used to stand at the top window and then he used to call, Rowley, Rowley. Then she used to swear at him in Afrikaans. And he never knew. He never knew because she actually waved to her when she... And that was Mrs. Rowley. And her husband, and at the bottom was Mrs. Burnett. She was in the wheelchair. Her husband was a dockyard policeman in Simonstown, but they had no children. When me and Auntie Lorna Dela Cruz, always when she used to just open the door and call one of us, we had to see that she had a little tea or just washed her down and looked after her. She was Scottish. That was Windsor Flat.
Okay.
Windsor Flat was right opposite our houses, which was always very nice people. Very, there was never any arguments, there was never any race problems. Going down to Windsor House was Mrs. Fish. She was a midwife because she had this navy blue nurse's clothing on with big straps. And she was a chickie. She was a big woman. I think she was a midwife. And she used to lean over her wall there in Windsor House. Opposite was the canteen where the fishermen used to come and drink when they came from sea.
Yes.
And she used to tell them to shut up. She wants to sleep now because before she starts work, she wants to sleep. Yes. And then Uncle Bobby, I think, was the man that was running that bar and used to close the door that she can have a rest before she goes back to her job. And the fishermen used to come from sea and their first stop was that canteen. The bar, we called it the canteen. That was the old people used to say it was the canteen. That was the New King's Hotel. It was a little pub there on the end of the New King's Hotel. And next to that was the off sales where they bought their wine. But the fishermen also just went to the canteen. And then my brother, also as a child, used to wait. And Johnny, which was a backward boy that lived with the Padawers in the other lane, he used to carry the baskets up. Uncle Clarence, Uncle Billy Clarence, and everybody that lived up Windsor Road, further up Boys Drive, and they got the tip for carrying the baskets from the fishermen. They used to carry it right to the house, and then they had the bicycle money. Johnny used to get his cigarettes money from that was a lot of money because I think we only paid 3 pence for the ticket, for the bicycle ticket, blue ticket. Everybody that lived in Windsor Road is passed on, is gone. This is Hildebrand, Auntie Meyer, their children are still alive. But the saddest part was when in 1974, my uncle, Auntie May's husband was still alive. He lived with us in the one room. And he said, Marie, hier's 'n manie buitekant met 'n lang jas aan en 'n hoed. Groot hoed op en it was 'n Afrikaner. And he came in and with this papers, and so he called me and he said, you must sign here because everybody must get out. It's been declared a white area now. I will never forget, his name was Burger. His surname was Burger. And I refused to sign that. And he said, well, as julle nie gaan teken nie, dan gaan julle almal opgesluit word, want that is now the law. It is apartheid, we must get out. Everybody in Kalk Bay must have to move. Mrs. Dela Cruz was our eldest one in our lane. They were thrown in Lavender Hill. She was not there for 6 months and she died of a broken heart. I went to visit them because lucky for us we had this ground because my husband was traveling.
Where your house is now,
where the house is now, and we built this house quick that we can move out because he didn't want his children. Everybody was moved to where this parkour, whatever they call the places that the government put up for the so-called colored people to get out. And she wasn't there. I used to go and visit Mrs. Dela Cruz and Lorna, and she actually died of a broken heart. That is how people their roots,
Yes.
that is how they miss their roots.
Yes.
And people coming in there now and buying, I will never ever understand that. They will never, because
So-
they never went through that. Kulsum was our last owner.
Her was that your
landlady,
landlady?
yes.
And what is Kulsum, sir?
Kulsum was Lockday. Kulsum Lockday. And she had to sell to this Mrs. Price. My husband, Christy, he travelled Walfish Bay. And he asked, can he buy the houses where we were in? Because it was only sold for 7,000 rand, I think that 4 houses was. That is what Kulsum got for that houses that time. And she had to sell to a white. They said no, only a white can buy it because everybody that is of other color must get out there.
Get out.
The padder was moved, everybody. It was a sad day to move out of Kalk Bay where your roots were. But they, like I say, people that never went through that will never understand that. They will never understand what it was to be uprooted and thrown in places, strange places you don't know. Granny was an old Filipino with that long teeth. They never had, I don't know, it was a proper Filipino woman. Eh?
Yes.
She used to make watermelon confit.
That's
Now
the one.
she was a Hildebrand. They didn't care what your mother said. If they want to hit you, she hit you. Now she wait for us to come out the lane. They were there in the front. They were in that front house. They want to go swim. She used to say, "Gaat julle weer swem?" Nou, "Gaat julle weer swem? Julle moet op in die son lê. Julle kan kom weg." And we must go prick a watermelon confit every day. We had to go prick a watermelon confit. And then one day I said, "No man, we're not going to go around the lane." Then we go. We get over by the New Kings, by the fence. We were right next to the New Kings, over that me, Peter, basically, we get over that fence. We go right down to the main road. Then we must come, or we go around the back and we come up there by the outspan, go up to the front and come down the top over that wall, over that fence there, come into our garden where Uncle Arrange used to make plant vegetables and stuff. All that long way just to get out of Granny used to just wait for us outside over the wall. She was cheeky. I will never forget. Sometimes we cry on where must prick. You get nothing. You must just do it. You get maybe a piece of confit, lovely confit Granny used to make. But you just had to keep quiet. Whatever the older people told you to do, you just had to do.